I'm Vicki Matranga, Design Programs Coordinator for the International Housewares Association. We're here in Chicago at McCormick Place at our big show, our annual International Home and Housewares Show. I manage the Innovation Theater, where I book about 20 speakers who talk about new product development and launch, and all the associated disciplines, be it social media, to branding, to material sourcing. I've worked with Howard Lim for several years now. He's come to the show to work with us at our Inventors Corner, where he's advised inventors on the importance of branding, and then at a more deeper level, here at the Innovation Theater, where experts in many fields, makers and sellers of products in our industry, come to the theater to learn how to improve their business. Howard is very professional in his presentation and in his preparation. It's always a pleasure to work with him in booking him as a speaker and selecting his time slot. Audiences find great value in his presentations because of his unique insights in how branding is important at a strategic level in all industries, be they consumer electronics, home appliances, or services and products in other industries. As he explains, branding must be a top-down and not a bottom-up kind of approach, not from the product level, but from the strategic corporate view of their entire business. Our theater seats about 350 people, and generally speaking, Howard pretty much fills the room, and there are often a lot of questions afterwards, and people clustered around him afterwards to carry on their private conversations. That to me indicates that audiences come to the program because they find it to be valuable from what they've heard from the past, and they stay beyond the program to speak with him privately because they want to continue those conversations because of their value. I would highly recommend Howard as a speaker at your event. He's not only informative, he's a pleasure to work with, his programs are entertaining, and he's great with follow-up too.
Further ado, I'd like to introduce Howard Lim. He's spoken in this theater several times before and he has participated in our our Inventors Review over in North Building. He's an expert on branding and what the branding experience means, how the brand is actually a promise between the maker or the provider of the service or product and the consumer. So he's going to be sharing his wisdom with us, and thank you very much, Howard, for joining us again.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Okay, we got a lot of content to go through, but let me just start off by why I'm actually here. I believe in the term learn, and then you earn, and then you return. So over the years, I've had my business for 27 years. So there's a lot that I've learned from working with Fortune 100 companies to entrepreneurs. And I'll be sharing a lot of the wins around that and how to be more successful. The other thing is that I'm going to be showing case studies that are evidence-based solutions. They're factual, okay? They're not just pie in the sky or just talk. The other thing is that I want you to think bigger. A lot of companies, I work with companies that are 100,000, a couple hundred million to billion-dollar companies, and there's always space to think bigger. So I'm here to inspire you to take action on and apply what you learn in this room, okay? So let's start. Okay, so what we do, just to give a little background about who I am and what I do, is my company. We design for every industry, every category, every segment. We design for product, service, and for information. We develop systems that work for all these. We design every aspect around business development and branding, and we really create a hybrid between the two. The other thing is that we remove the limitations of companies. Even though you might be a Fortune 100 company or a startup, doesn't matter. We look at the limitations and lifting those limitations. We're all about increasing value, increasing your value, increasing the value behind what you do behind the scenes, and then increasing the value between you and your customers, building more equity and value, okay? So just to give you a little background, we actually helped out Steve Jobs when he came back in, for example, with the G3s. We actually, with Disney, brought out Lion King for them, which has produced $1 billion in revenue. And we helped out Fox, we helped out create the DVDs that took over VHS and betas. So I'm going to be showing you literally some of our intellectual property of how you could apply it to your businesses. Just to give you a little background as far as some factual. Remember the superhighway? And then it turn into the World Wide Web? you actually see one of the posters that was used to lobby between Novell and Bring It and IBM and all the big giants of how we could use the internet. And it became the World Wide Web. These are just one of the series of posters that were used. This was the first digital ad ever used for Fujitsu. That put Fujitsu on a map. It's the first digital ad ever. Nobody knew how to figure it out, and our team figured out how to create digital images before the digital revolution. We helped create the digital revolution. Alegria with Cirque du Soleil is the first movie poster created and changed the industry of movie industry of how to use technology. And then we start working with animations, where everything was called online animation, and we took things offline. This is before Final Cut, Premiere, all those software. We had figured out how to actually save more time for companies and how to create things more creatively to engage the consumer. Everything you'll see is about engaging your customer. This is Burn Cycle, which is the first role game play movie for the gaming industry, which now changed how we actually look at licensing technology and licensing between properties. Like Lara Croft, it has nothing to do with really the game itself. It has to do with the licensing. And this is the first for Access Media, which actually gave rise to the debit system, which now is used as a standard behind all the campuses of your debit card. And finally, this is the first package design that was used for all the major retail stores with the maximum amount of visibility for a product. No one had figured out how to create a package like this and fulfill on its cost. So I'm just giving you just a little bit of my background, and why I'm up here is to return what I've learned over the years. One last thing was the first hot and cold bag design. Now you're seeing hot and cold bags and they're not very nice looking. We design things for a company that's specialized. And so it's just for me, like this says someone unfortunately is in the hospital, one of your friends, well then you have something that you can give to them that you feel good about giving this special gift. Let's say it's a slice of cake or whatever it may be, that you feel like it's special that you're giving it to that specific friend or family member. So what we're about is really game changing. We like creating changes in the world. We like making things as a standard that eventually all companies start to use. And we help a lot of companies establish leadership roles. Here again, this works whether you're a Fortune 100 company or even a startup. We're about changing the history and changing the past and changing the future, okay? By creating better lifestyles. So I'm here to empower you to achieve your aspirations. So we're going to look at what are your deep aspirations for your business. So the first place I would start off with is how do you define success? A lot of companies that have interviewed over the years, when we're working with them, they're like, well, I'm not sure, but let's look at this. So this became like, you could say, the common denomination, interviewing thousands of companies, thousands of entrepreneurs, thousands of Fortune 100 companies. So they want higher profits, for example. Let's say you got different shareholders and you have to show next quarter that you're going to earn more profit, more higher margins for them. The other one might be more customers you really want. You got customers, but not really the ones that you particularly like or you really have, but the ones that you ultimately want is what you aspire to. Recognized as an industry leader. A lot of companies go, you know what, we want to be a house, we want to be a house-known brand. Okay, so be recognized as an industry leader. More time with your loved ones. A lot of companies are very successful, and then the owners or the founders go, you know what, I just want more time. I want more time, I want systems in place, and I want to be with more of my loved ones. Another one would be like making a difference for humanity. You like to just say, you know, with Bill Gates, for example, he's all about humanity, right? He's about beyond making a profit. He's a vision beyond a profit, okay? So these are just some of the things that we found that what companies are looking for and how they define success. So now we've got to look at, well, what causes businesses to fail, okay? So a lot of times businesses fail because they have a misuse of funds. They don't know how to allocate their funds. They're not putting enough towards business development, not putting enough towards brand development. They move right into the product, okay? Irrelevant business plan, a business plan that doesn't really reach cross cultures or even cross generations from X, Y's, and Z's. I'll be talking quite a bit about this. Lack of brand impressions. They don't have the brand impressions they want to stand out amongst the cluttered space in a market, okay? Lack of a competent team. They might have a very strong team on the left side, which has to do with operations, left side of the brain, like logic, structure, but they have no creativity of how to actually engage with the actual customer. Or vice versa. They spend a lot of time on creativity, but there's no foundation and no structure, okay? Lack of loyalty, meaning the customer, the employees are not loyal to their culture. So we're going to talk about all these things and how to avoid these mistakes. This is the illustration of how companies really work with creative companies. They usually have a great idea, and then you get someone that's usually like the creative director or the director, right? And then they actually let's say you want to deal with social media, then they're passing that information that they actually understood about what your needs are, and they're passing to that person, that individual person who's actually the production person, right? So that's pretty much how it's typically done. But what happens when you want, like let's say web, and let's say you want print, and let's say you want copywriting. So now what happens is that the client has to play the creative director and try to direct these different entities. What happens is that you're not going to get synchronicity, you're going to get what I call confusion, and let alone there's going to be a lot of finger pointing, okay? So it gets even more complicated as your company grows, and let's say you want now a retail space, let's say you want presentations, you want vehicle designs, let's say you want print for magazines. See how convoluted and how complex it gets pretty quickly? You're now having to really orchestrate maybe 15 different entities and try to have them work in harmony. Okay, this is really the typical model. The other problem that starts to happen when you work that way is what I call the Sybil effect. Let's say that this is really what your company's value is, this shape, this color. Okay, you're trying to express it, right? And you're trying to communicate it. And let's say this is a name of the company. Let's say that this is the website. Let's say this is the brochure. Let's say this is the logo. These are the colors. This is the marketing. This is the social media. You see that there's really nothing that actually would reflect it. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is there's a lack of integration between the creative talent and how to express who you are in its position. Another problem becomes that the position itself is wrong. You're not clearly positioned for a great market share. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about this. So this is what's typical with most companies. This is the biggest problems that usually companies face, whether you're a multi-billion-dollar company or just starting off. Okay? This is how we figured out the solution. Is first, you got to figure out your core positioning. You got to look at 3 levels of your core positioning. You got to look at your business, you got to look at your market, and you got to look at your customer. Most companies treat those as separate subdivisions rather than looking at them as really how they're going to integrate them, as interdependent. Okay? So when this is communicated in your position very clearly, what happens is now then if you have all your alignments done properly, all your engagement points, your touch points, let's say your website, your brochure, and everything starts to look the same and starts to communicate and reflect the same value of what you want to put out there, what happens is that the image is going to hit the consumer stronger and be more direct. Now the problem is this. You don't have control over the brand image. And the brand image is this. Let's say, let's say you, I'm picking on you. Let's say you want to own, if I give you a choice to own a brand new Mercedes or a brand new Ford Pinto, what would you choose? A Mercedes, okay. So this is how powerful branding is. That's what she owns in her mind. She maybe have never ever driven either of those cars, but she already has an expectation. Does that make sense? And it takes a lot of development, a lot of imagery to create that image in that person's mind. I call it real estate. And there's only so much real estate a person can hold in their mind. It's the question is, how concise are you being with your messaging? The parts you do own, this is the cool thing, the parts that you do own is your core position and the identity system that gets to express that position. Does that make sense? So you get to influence either on a way that's done from the hip, or you're doing it very strategically. That's actually by design. Unfortunately, most companies do it from the hip. They don't. How are you supposed to know this information? It's not taught in school. And then there's another problem too when it comes to branding. A lot of people that say they do branding, a lot of them are doing parts of branding, like let's say advertising, graphic design, marketing, so forth. They're not looking at the big giant equation of what ultimately creates that brand. Does that make sense? So there tends to be a lot of confusion out there with branding itself. What is branding? Like I said, the way that we look at things is looking at a whole brain approach. If you look at every large company that's made it highly successfully, let's say Apple, they're looking from two equations. The left-hand side, which is going to be the business structure, profitability, logic, operations, okay? That's the left. The right-hand side is the creativity. Most companies start with the left side of the brain. You need to start with the right side of the brain or re-examine and rebrand from the right side of the brain, which is the big picture, the creativity. Aesthetics does matter. Aesthetics does matter, especially now because there's more products on the shelf than ever before. How are you going to stand out in the consumer's mind? Okay? So you got to take a whole brain approach. Each are equally important. So what we looked at is we broke it down to three. And look at your company, where you're at with this. There's what I call phase one, the master blueprint. Looking at your business, how it's going to be run, like operations, profitability, structure, employee, HR. Then there's the market, which I actually call customer strategy. Who is specifically your customer? What generation? X, Y, and Z. Can you actually create a product that hits multiple generations? Phase two is looking at authentic brand identity, meaning that what is going to be the identity? What is going to be the look and the feel? What's going to be the colors that you're going to represent? What are the colors that you're going to own? Like Kodak owns yellow, for example. Fuji owns green. Coca-Cola owns red. Pepsi owns blue. You see how that works? There's a deep psychology behind color in itself of how you actually build that billboard in the consumer's mind. Then it gets into brand management. Let's say that you want to grow your company, you have a store, you got products, you want to create line extensions, or you want to create affiliations, or you want to create more bricks and mortar as a chain. Okay? That's called brand management, and how you're going to manage the brand to protect it and also grow it. So strategy. Let's start with strategy. What is strategy? And I get now in defining some of these bits and pieces in more in depth. So the first thing is that you don't leave things to chance. Okay? Don't leave your business to chance. Don't leave your brand to chance. The second thing is hope is not a strategy. A lot of people just hope they're going to have the right person pick up their product. They're going to hope that their customers are going to pick up their product. They're going to hope they have the right distribution. They're going to hope this and that. That is not a strategy. Okay? Now this is a great thing. A strategy does outline a map. It does create a map, and a map leads to treasures. So the question is, what treasures are you creating? What have you outlined? Okay? So like I mentioned, there's three components that we look at that make a very strong strategy. It's going to be your customer strategy, the business strategy, and a brand strategy, looking at them together as one map. Most companies go and they make this critical mistake. They treat brand design as the same as graphic design. They go, oh, we have this product, now let's think of a designer, right? They think of it as an afterthought. That's graphic design. Brand design is where you're designing with the consumer in mind, and you're actually changing how you're going to do your business model. Does that make sense? Totally different animal. Okay? So you got to look at it from a three-part. So let's break it down even further. So brand strategy. One of the critical things you look at is you don't build your brand or your business around a product. Did you get that? Don't build it around a product because you're going to limit yourself. What you want to do is you want to build a brand around your vision that sets up the context of what you're going to fit into that. Apple is not built around a product. That's why Steve Jobs was able to come out with so many new products. But it had an underlying values, and it came from the vision that you want to make ultimately user-friendly products. Well, that keeps it wide open, doesn't it? And his thing is about using intuitiveness. And that's why aesthetics and functionality played a gigantic role, which is going back to the right and left side of the brain. Okay? Or like you take a look at Richard Branson. You take a look at the biggest companies, they're going to be looking at what difference can they make first. Then they got a bigger playground to play with. Okay? Philosophy. Most companies, if you don't have a philosophy, you're going to look like another Me Too. You're going to look like everybody else. And they get lost in the clutter. You got to have a philosophy of why you're doing what you do. There's a reason for it. And maybe you haven't figured out, it hasn't come to the surface yet, but there's a reason why you're actually here. There's a reason why you actually have a company or a product that you're bringing to market or you have to market. It doesn't matter if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you still need to have a strong philosophy because you're going to reach a limitation at some point. Okay? Values. Principles that you'll stand by. Meaning that there's going to be values in your culture that you want to define, like is it going to be integrity-based? Is it going to be customer service-based? Is it going to be honesty-based? What are you basing everything around to build your culture, to do the right hiring for employees, to the right salespeople, to people actually representing your brand and actually engaging with the brand to actually experience that? You got to be clear on your values. There's usually 3 to 5 values that you should have. Brand promise, your overall core positioning. Meaning, like a couple examples would be like FedEx. Okay, absolutely, positively guaranteed overnight. That's how they position themselves from the post office. And they knew no one else can claim that space. So you got to look at how are you going to position yourself uniquely, differently from the others. Not more, but different. Okay? Differentiate. You got to have a strong personality. A couple examples like the Geico, they have the Gecko Lizard, or they got Mahan for Allstate. They're both insurances, right? And you got Flow for Progressive. These are all in the same industry, but they have different personalities that people can relate to because brands are treated like people. They should have a heart, they should have a soul, they should have a physical presence to them, and they should have a voice. But what are you creating? If you're not sure about that, you're going to have a schizophrenic person walking around. Does that make sense? Okay? You got to go beyond the product because if you're only basing around a product, you're going to be based as a commodity and you're going to get beaten up on pricing. That's just the way it's going to work. Okay, so brands, business strategies, here again, the clarity of why you're in business. There's a reason why you're in business, the big why. Looking at stronger IP. A lot of companies, you could patent things that you didn't even think were possible. You could trademark things that you didn't even think were possible. This builds the portfolio of your value. When it comes to evaluation and selling your company, a lot of times you could sell your company 10 times more than the balance sheet because of the intellectual property you own. You could create terms, new terms. You create fictitious names, things that really matter in building that brand. Okay? Business model, solve multiple problems. Most companies, they have a business model that only solves one problem. There's so many problems you could solve that you are probably so unaware of how you could actually take your same idea, a widget, and actually build it so it has more legs and more revenue streams. Okay? Capital. This is a big one. Misuse and allocation of capital. I'm going to talk a lot about that. Team. Imbalanced team of experts. A lot of time is way too heavy on the left-hand side. Usually when I go into big corporations, they got all these great thinkers that are dealing with numbers and bottom line, but there's no one on the right-hand side. How are we going to engage the customer? What are we going to do creatively? What are we going to do think differently? And how are we going to differentiate? Okay? Those are the parts that really matter to the customer. Okay? And the customer doesn't care about how much money you're making. So you got to have it where it's even keel. Customer strategy is identifying the buyers, whether it's X, Y, baby boomers, or Zs. Inspiring, creating a culture that thrives. You got to create an inspiring culture, a culture where people want to work for your organization, like Google. People want to work with Google. People want to work with Apple. People want to work with REI because of the culture that's been created. Okay? Meaning, are you matching the lifestyle of the people that you're hiring? Identify lifestyle, which I just talked about. Quality. Quality is what builds long-term value. Most companies do not build things around quality, and unfortunately, it gets noticed. And that means countries as well. I mean, look at China. It's not even, made in China doesn't have a good representation. And even the U.S. is now making a final comeback, which is awesome. But the U.S. started off in mid-50s to 70s, super strong, and then went down as far as made in U.S. And Japan was the opposite. They started off in the 70s really as a poor brand as a country, and in the 80s took off because of Sony. So even countries have to brand themselves, okay? The payoff is this, is when you do things proper in the right sequence and you build from an architecture, not from hope, you shave off decades of mistakes and redos. Most companies, they start, they stop, they start, they stop, or they start and they hire that company, and they fire that company, and they hire that company, and they fire that company. They're not sure what's going on. Is it the marketing company? Is it the advertising? Is it the sales force? A lot of times it's none of that. It's you're not even clear of your culture. You're not even clear of your position. You're not clear of your vision, your philosophy, your values. So you're constantly hiring the wrong people because you have no baseline. Okay? Value, increasing the value of all stakeholders. I'm just talking about the shareholders that people might have invested in your company, but I'm talking about employees, I'm talking about actual customers. Anybody who actually sees themselves as part of engaging in your brand is part of your shareholders. Speed, stand out as an industry leader. When things are done right, as an architecture, like having a blueprint to the house, you could build it quicker than rather not having a blueprint. Profits, greater profits in a greater period of time. Here again, having a strong plan that outlines your treasure, you can get your treasures quickly. So here again, I talked a little bit about how budgets are usually done. So brand awareness budget, when you look on the web, you only find two things that they ever talk about. And I'm going to talk about what's really relevant now. So the things that I find when I go on the web and I say, well, how much should a company budget be? And the only thing that you find, you won't find anything on branding, but you could find things on marketing and advertising. And the general, and to show you real quickly, for revenues under $1 million, 8 to 10% for existing company. If you're bringing a new product out there, it should be 2 to 3 times that amount. Now let's take it to the extreme opposite. Over $50 million, it's 4 to 5%, and you could expect if you're bringing a new product out there, it'd be 2 to 3%, 2 to 3 times more. Excuse me. Now, what I say is that you could get all this done with just maybe a couple percentages more and be a lot more effective and create a lot more value and get a lot more success quicker with the proper allocation of your budget. Now, when I say cheap is expensive, is a lot of people go, well, we got to start off this much money because we have this much money, or we want to hire this creative company because they're cheaper. What happens is that you end up redoing the work again, and it costs you not just the materials of having to rebuild your brand, it costs you the customers you could have had that are now gone to another brand, which took up your market share. That's where it gets expensive. Implementation. So, now we move to implementation, which is also called execution. We start off with strategizing. You want to strategize from the big picture, your big vision. Okay, so now we move into implementation. What is implementation? This is what a true branding firm looks like. So a lot of times when graphic designers, advertising, and marketing people say they do branding, they're not a true branding firm. They might do, like, let's say marketing, right? And designers might do the mark, which is also referred to as a logo, which we'll talk about the difference between the two. But that itself is not really being a branding firm. A branding firm is where they should have multiple disciplines. They have mastered multiple disciplines. From, let's say, billboards, cause marketing, animations, videos, storefronts. They should have mastered so they could actually work and integrate everything into an identity system that actually is an identity system. Does that make sense? Graphic design, marketing, advertising, social media, super important, but have to be done in a particular sequence. If they're not done in a particular sequence, you're going to waste your money. A lot of people go, oh, we need marketing, we need social media. If you're not clear of your platform, if you're not clear of your position, you're going to start broadcasting things that have nothing to do with your company that differentiates you in the market. Does that make sense? I see that, and I see that with companies that are in the $1 billion that we go in, and they've done pretty good, but once we change them, they capture so much more market share. Okay? I'm showing you where you could correct these mistakes early on if you're a newer company. So, not to complicate things, but we've actually gone way beyond that. We're a business development and branding firm And what we do is we came up with a whole system approach, which is strategy, implementation, and management. And then we have 6 different divisions, which is in business, PR, advertising, marketing, legal, and branding. And when we integrate everything in a sequence and we customize based on the customer, based on their vision, we work from their vision, and then we roll out accordingly. So I'm going to be sharing here again intellectual property, not for you to copy, but actually for you to utilize and to get excited and inspired and to actually apply into your own business, okay? So I want to talk about some of the big things between some of the most important intellectual pieces of property to your company, which is a logo versus a brand mark. Okay, so a logo is lower cost and less time to create. Okay, so a lot of times I see logos. Now the thing about a logo, here again, you're branding from the hip, or are you branding from an architecture with a plan in mind? When you're branding from the hip, you're going to create logos that you like and dislike. But what does that have to do with the position of the brand? You get that? You don't have to even like the mark. And now I'm going to talk about marks. Marks incorporate and symbolize your position overall in your space. And if you're a global player, then I'm going to talk about specific types of different marks. So a brand mark really is a trigger point to identify the source. So let's just say, you saw an apple, the apple symbol, right? The apple mark. It symbolized, and let's just say that you see that, it will pop up thoughts in your mind of what it represents. Oh, the culture creative people, innovation, okay? Quality, okay? Or let's just say that you put up Kmart, Walmart, Macy's, Nordstrom's. Do you see the scale of status that goes up? Doesn't mean one better than the other. It just means that they're targeted and identifying the source of where it's coming from. Does that make sense? So it's really important that you have a strong mark. Most people have a logo that is an actual liability for the company. A brand mark, the big advantage too, it professionally represents who you are. Meaning that you're not embarrassed to hand out your business card. Okay? It works across all media. A lot of times when I see logos, how are you supposed to embroider this? How are you supposed to, for shirts? How are you supposed to create it as an app? How is it supposed to be used electronically as a black and white? How is it supposed to translate to half size of a dime to a billboard? There's big problems when you have a logo versus a strong mark. It also becomes one of the greatest assets to all stakeholders. So it identifies a source. So let's say you're in a foreign country and you identify Coca-Cola and you don't identify any other labels that are on the shelf. More than likely, you're going to choose that Coca-Cola because you can identify the source and you get its association and you feel it's safe because there's trust that's built into it over years. You see how that works? Okay? Worn as a badge. Let's say Harley Davidson. The bikers, they wear that as a badge. You notice that? Harley Davidson bikers versus, trying to, wear a Honda. It's a whole different vibe. Okay? They're proud of what they belong to. The human being wants to plug themselves into something. Do you have what they want to plug into? Think about it. Okay? Human beings, we want to plug ourselves into because we want to feel like we belong to something, right? Whether if it's a social class, whether if it's this or that, that's how we relate. That's called relationship. Your brand should be relating, but it has to be relating from a position. And if it's not relating from a position, you're doing it from hope. So here's the transformation of a logo to a brand mark. Even Apple's gone through this. Okay? They started off to the far left, and they migrated to the far right. Okay? That's what's moving products. Okay? So for example, like let's say that you own Nike. You go, hey Howard, you could have all the inventory, you could have all the distribution. I'm not going to give you the swoosh, and I'm not going to give you the name. What's the company worth? See how it's built over years, and it's built far greater than the balance sheet? Is even that mark. So that's what I call the entry point to the brand. That itself is not branding. That is a part of an equation of building a brand. But it's a very important part. Here's Microsoft. Okay? A lot of companies are creating pictorial marks or abstract marks being separated from the name of the company so they become universal if you're going global. Microsoft, strong mark now. How is that supposed to translate when you're in Egypt? how's that supposed to translate when you're in Russia? You get that? It gets very costly and it gets very confusing. If you just show that mark, it's now a universal language. You see how powerful that is? And it's very simple. The strongest marks, we created 22 attributes. The top 3, bold, simple, and unique. Bold, simple, and unique. If your mark is not bold, if it's not simple, if it's not unique, you probably have a logo. It's not a good or bad thing. I'm just saying that then it doesn't give you the universal adaptation for different market spaces. Even Starbucks is going through a transformation. See how they're not saying Starbucks around the mark? This is what's called a pictorial mark, by the way. They're now using a very simple mark. Okay? So, case studies. Now I'm just kind of put it all together for you. Okay, now we've talked about theory. Great. Okay, I'm going to show you actually when you put this together, how it transforms and quickly evolves your company. Okay. Myler B. Butler & Sons is actually, I met someone here last year. He was sitting in the audience. He was actually the head of marketing. And then he was smart enough to take me on because I offer like a half hour of my time through my book, which I'll offer here. And we had a great conversation with him and the founder, one of the founders of the company. He's actually 3 generations old. And he's the first Bohemian governor general. He started the business in 1928. This is the 3rd generation. And we're talking all the way to the very beginning. And selling door to door with his products. Okay? And evolved into several entities, from retail grocery stores to a home mart to a liquor store, okay, to warehousing to private labeling. So his company started to grow, and he's out in the Bahamas, which is great. I got invited to go to the Bahamas. I got to see his property. It was a much bigger company than I thought because of his image that he projected. It felt like it was a small company, but it turned out to be a very large company. Here again, he's actually the forefather, you could say. He's on a $20 bill. It's really cool. So there's a lot of heritage with this brand. So the first thing that we did is that we looked at here again, the first thing that we went into is it was a master strategy. We examined what's your position in the marketplace. Who's in the marketplace that's encroaching onto your marketplace? What's your strategy from brand to the business, to the branding? The first thing that we did is look at the architecture of their business. Here again, you don't want to build your business around a product. You want to build it around a vision. Okay? And I say that again. You don't want to build your brand around a product. You want to build it around a vision. So with him, it's kind of hard to read, but it started off with Myler B. Butler & Sons Limited. You have the Myler B. Butler & Sons Distribution, Butler's Home Essentials, Butler's Bargain Mart, Flying Dutchman Liquor Store, which is a private label. Anyways, what we found out is that there is no way you can really leverage a brand strong from this to create a lot of credibility very quickly and create a lot more brand awareness. Because here again, they weren't growing as fast as they knew they could for over 3 generations. So what we did is we built the architecture of their business and associate all the products under different categories, which is, let's just start off with simplifying the name, Myler Butler. Because this is a mouthful. Most people, we interviewed several of their customers, how do you remember, Myler B. Butler & Sons Limited? And he said, Myler Butler, Myler Butler, Myler Butler. So the first thing that we did, which is great, one of the brothers is family owned, they were smart, they actually had the MylerButler.domain.com, which is really cool. So I go, wow, that saved a lot of headaches trying to get that one. So then we looked at, well, why don't we build it as extensions? So why don't we go from Myler Butler Distributors, Myler Butler Home Essentials, Myler Butler Mart, and then we kind of keep Flying Dutchman separate, okay? Doesn't that make a lot more sense? Now there's real leverage around Myler Butler, okay? It builds a better portfolio, builds more value, builds more credibility faster, especially if you want to go global. This is their vision, which is really cool. Myler Butler transform everyday businesses into movements that create positive differences in society, enriching the areas of business, education, medicine, government, individual, families, and general public. That's really powerful. You could say that's more than just a product, okay? See how big that is, working from the vision? Now this gives it a lot more of a playground that they could play in. And this is an idea of the philosophy. Myler Butler's value to the society through building a legacy of business ethics, monitoring and empowering people. We sustain our bohemian heritage and reputation with courageous leadership, mutual respect, and personal accountability. That's really powerful. That's their philosophy. That means whatever they do, whoever they hire, has to evolve and revolve around this statement. You see how this is much more than just a product? This is something that people could engage. This is people that someone could actually hook up into and be part of a culture. Now, saying all that, we go now through an examination of where they were. Okay, we're transforming them right now. This is the current website. This is the current office space, which is only one office. It's quite a large headquarters. This is just one truck. They have different fleets. This is the headquarters from the outside, looking from the warehouse upward. But you can see this doesn't really feel like the vision, doesn't feel as powerful, nor does it feel like the philosophy. So what I call this is disparity. Their identity, their core now is really strong on a 10-point scale. It's like more like an 8, 9, and 10 on a 10-point scale. But their identity is still like a 2 or 3, 4 at best. Do you get that? So what we need to do now is create an equilibrium so they become a magnaphone of who they are, how they're positioned, and how they want to be represented to the world. So this is sort of some of their competition locally. This is some competition that are larger organizations that have been creeping on our space, and people don't even know about Myler Butler, even though they're 3 generations, because these other companies on the outside look more professional. Does that make sense? Their identity is carrying more value, even though whether it's true or not on the inside, the outside is what's bringing people in. Okay? That's why I say aesthetics does matter. So this is the old logo, right? This is the current logo. Now what we went through was a whole series of brand marks. We went through about 1,500 different concepts based around their philosophy, their vision, their positioning. And we create what are called classifications of marks, or called abstract marks, pictorial marks, word marks, and there's also called letter form marks. So each one of these came from a different angle of how we're going to build the brand and tell a story behind the mark. Does that make sense? And each one of these represented, in a sense, the different colors as well, different ways of arranging colors. But they're all simple, bold, and unique, and they carry the other 17 attributes to make a very strong mark, so it wouldn't have to be done later, and create a lot of impressions, a lot of people's minds in a lot of different countries. So we ended up with this one because we found that this one really filled who they are as a distribution warehouse and retail and private label. And so the hub was really important because it also gave the idea behind the export-import. And being in the Bahamas, we chose warmer colors. But the whole idea that they're an international company, so we want to create a very strong brand mark. Then we came up with the tagline, respect, quality, and value guaranteed. That came out of the strategy session as far as their positioning, how they're to position themselves differently than a competition. We always look at the competition, how they're being positioned, and what can we do differently, and how are we going to get share market. Okay? Here's the before and after. So we're going through this transformation. Like I mentioned, I met the gentleman here last year sitting in the theater. We did this is a private label, the liquor store. Okay? And these are the different types of concepts that we came up with. This one we want to give more personality. The other one's definitely more corporate. You get the difference? You design marks based on who your target audience is and what is the personality behind the brand. Okay, it's really important. So, we created things that were really fun, very different, unique. A Flying Dutchman, he was the one that delivered liquor, and during the rough times of getting liquor over to the Bahamas, and he was able to do it every time and fulfill to the locals. And so this is the final mark that we came up with. This is the before and after, just showing you. This one, by the way, see, how would that ever work as an app? How would that ever work as a one-color job? How would that ever work as an embroidery? See how it's too convoluted? It's more of an illustration. It's not a strong line art. Okay, you getting the difference there? And then these are the difference to the way we're going to transform the buildings. This is the old website. This is the new one that's currently being working on. We want to create a story. The story is the 3 generations. The story is why they do business. So we use a lot of the latest technology. We're going to have a sliding show and showing movies and showing happy customers, telling a story. This is what's called a brand style guide. This is how you keep control over the brand as you're building out more, let's say, retail stores or liquor stores or new products. This is how you manage the brand. These are like putting in the actual core DNA, what we call the core DNA. This is what we call like defining what is the DNA behind a brand. This is what's called when you get into the colors themselves. You know, we actually came up with like the Bermuda blue. We actually created the name. So these are the primary colors. These are the complementary colors, and that's the accent color. How does it translate to RGB, CMYK? That way when it's given to a third-party vendor, let's say web developers or printers, or let's say advertising people or whatever, everyone's following an identity. They're creating things that look like your brand rather than a whole separate brand. They're not killing your brand. They're actually adding value. Does that make sense? Okay, that's how you control the brand. Okay? These are the do's and don'ts. Never do this with the logo, you know, or the mark that would create as a logo. These are the fonts. Always use these fonts. In these different situations, for body copy, use this font. For headlines, use this font. This is how the big boys do it. This is how Apple does it. This is what we've done for Fox Television, ABC, HBO, Mattel. You keep control over it, and you keep control over your licensing. Now you build a brand, a stronger brand image in the consumer's mind, because you're building this thing in the consumer's mind going, oh, I kind of seen that before. Oh, I've seen that before. I really seen that before. You see how that works? If you try to use different fonts, different colors, you actually send out different messages, and the consumer never understands who you are. They never get your identity. They're always lost. Okay, just even how to type a letter, you know, how is it written? Where's the margins? Where do you start? What font do you use? What size do you use? What's your leading? What's your kerning? All that matters to keep consistency. The more consistent you are with your brand, the more impressions you're going to have, stronger impressions you're going to have in a consumer's mind. Okay, so now it goes to the private labeling. Okay, that's the before. Now we changed the labeling. And I'm just going through this because there's a lot to show. This is another concept, and there's another concept. And then it's showing you the before and after for their private label. Okay? So it's all about, that's why I say aesthetics matters. So many companies put aesthetics to the side, and they don't even think about it. And when you really got to think about it is up front when you're designing your business. Because you got to think of how are you going to hit the emotions of the consumer. If you don't hit the emotions of the consumer will never buy. They don't think logically. Even stockbrokers, even people that buy stocks, it's all emotions. Okay? Then the logic backs up the emotional decision. The logics back up the logical decision. And this is proven through psychology. So I'm going to show you another case study which we have rebuilt 52 retail stores, and now they're going to 60, and they're moving very rapidly. This company came to us. They said we heard you could turn around companies. And the WSS, this is the old logo. Then this is their collateral material. This is what I call the assessment of looking at them. And then this is before and after. We got rid of warehouse shoe sale because people didn't recognize them as warehouse shoe sale and was confused, are you WSS or warehouse shoe sale? We kept WSS. We changed the color, the vibration to red. This looked too cheap. This looked more racy, more masculine. We used silver because silver, one of their values was innovation. Huge psychology on this stuff. Shoe style and selection was their positioning. They carried apparel, but shoes is really what they're known for. They carry Nike, Adidas. This is before, this is after. This is before, this is after. Started to shift how people identified them. People did not recognize them in LA, and now they recognize them all over, thinking it's a new store. Because We designed it so they differentiated from the background and they differentiated from the competition, which would be Nikes and Zappos. Before and after. Website, we want to create the best website, better than Zappos, better than Nike, which we did. We made it even more user-friendly, and it worked. The results is the bottom line. How did it change the bottom line? This is what step 2, we're moving to all the interiors. Here again, they were on a decrease of losing 10% a year for 3 years. This is what happened as well. This is the brand style guide to control the brand as they build every store. Every store has to follow these guidelines to keep control. I told them they'd have a 10% gain over 12 months. They had 200% in 7 months, which is unheard of. I was blown out of water when the CFO told me. They had a 1,600% gain on their website. And they had strong relationships with their vendors. They had multiple revenue streams, not just with retail, now with website and events. We created a stronger business model that was more adaptable for different generations. So, there's 3 ways that you could actually create your brand. You could read a lot, okay, or the first one is have it done for you, okay? The second one is hire a consultant, where a consultant would consult, but they're not building a brand. They're consulting with you and giving you a roadmap, okay? And then do it yourself. Do a lot of reading, read a lot of branding books. So what I've done is when I first started, like I mentioned 27 years ago, and helped really branding, where it became more of what is branding and more of a buzzword. Unfortunately, it's been misused, but the point being is this. I did a lot of reading. There was only 2 books that were out there on branding at the time. And none of them, they're very good books, David Eckhart, Strong Brands, great book. But there's no exercises. Like, where's the practical information on how to build your brand? Okay? So what I ended up doing is I wanted to support people on all these 3 levels, because I get a lot of people going, well, we could only afford, let's say a book. So what I did is I had this vision. I had my vision, our vision is to enrich millions of lives by designing businesses to shift their service products or information into authentic brands. Brands that matter more, okay? So what I've done is I actually give you a business brand creating from scratch, an upgrade, or a makeover. And that's what I offer. And then the second thing is what I do is I help companies out. They go, well, we don't have a budget where we could help you build our brand. Can you at least tell us what direction we should move with our current look and feel? This is where I give an assessment. I usually charge $3,000. I'm only charging below cost at $497. I only have I think 21 spaces for this. We do this over the internet. You send me your website, you send me your logo, and I'll tell you what you can do, and then you turn around to your creative people. The third way is I'll give you this is what Myler Butler did. I gave him a 30-minute call, gave him my book, an autographed book, which shows you how to articulate more your brand and educate you. And that's for $35, value at $285. I only have 26 books here. And the way that would work is you basically fill out your form, what do you want, and then I accept MasterCard or Visa, and then you would email me if you're buying a book or having an assessment. So I wanted to thank you all, and I'm open for questions, right?
Please raise your hands if you have a question. Anything in the back of the room here? Did I see a hand? No. Anyone in any of these
There
aisles?
must be some question. You got how many?
Okay, good. I'll go around that side of the room.
Howard, great talk. I just had a quick question about the differentiation. And you mentioned Geico, how they have the gecko, obviously, but they also have the cavemen, and they've kind of started to go into these different directions. So what are your thoughts about that? Does it dilute the brand, or do you see that as a strength?
Well, with Geico, I actually see it where, in my opinion, you should stick to one avatar. That's what it's called, an avatar, because now you got to remember the caveman, you got to remember the lizard, you got to remember Is there another one? The paintings. So there's only so much space that you have in your mind, so what happens is you're limiting what you're going to remember. You know, you should stick to one theme and stick to that theme, especially if it's starting to work.
Any other questions? As long as I'm back here, okay.
Yeah, my question is, I think a lot of people would agree in here that their companies are run by a lot of linear thinkers, especially in the leadership part of the company. So I guess my question to you is, how do you cross that political barrier to convince them to invest in these changes?
By giving them facts about brands and about where the first thing I do, which I do work with a lot of companies like that, and then open up their minds,
Right.
is that I look at, well, what are your aspirations? What's your vision of your company? And they might go, well, we're doing what we want to do. We're making, $1 billion. But what do you want to do after that? What legacy do you want to leave behind? So I hit them more from the heart, the soul, and that's where I get them to wake up, and I do it in a gentle way. But then they start to see, they get excited because they start to see, wow, this could be much more than just going to a job. And then what happens after that point, we discuss, well, where do you want to take your vision, and do you have a plan around that? And at that point, then I show them what's the possibilities and give them some facts around things that they use. Like, let's say it's Apple Computer, let's say whatever it might be that they're associated with, so they could actually see for themselves how that's made a difference in their lives.
Thank you.
Anything else in this part of the room? Ah, yes, okay.
I work for a company that's small and growing, and we've gone through a lot of branding changes, and while we're trying to figure out who we are and how we're positioned, we've, like I said, changed a lot of times. So is there a formula or recommendation of how long you should remain with your logo before it changes?
Yeah, the recommendation as far as keeping your existing brand is looking at it from the standpoint, what's the potential that you haven't tapped into? So here again, when you get into the vision, and then you look at, especially when we start designing the brand architecture of the products that you do have, well, what are the future products, and how are you actually leveraging the brand to introduce those future products? And is there actually a lid right now? 99% of the time there is a lid, because they're not looking from the bigger picture. They're looking from what they're doing now, and they're not looking into the future. So when you design for the future, you actually see the potential, and then you could step into it, and then make that transition. So even large companies constantly change and re-engineer their look and their feel to capture more market share, to be a bigger space. So a lot of times they'll be doing an assessment. So a lot of times what I'll do is do one of those things that I offer. By the way, I'll be out there after we're done for those who want anything. But anyways, the point being is this: that's what we go through in an assessment. I look at where you're at, mark it up, give you from the logical side of what's not working, what's working, and then look from the right-hand side, what's possible, where are the potentials, and are you filling them up, and then where's the gap? The gap is the big thing. Where do you fit in that gap?
Hi, my name is Elise Fimlick, and I just attended Howard's session on authentic branding, and it was fantastic. He had some really revolutionary ideas on branding and how it can affect your company in a more positive way. And I found it extremely valuable, and I am motivated and inspired to go back to my company and to put his ideas into action. Thank you.